Escalation here between the U.S. and Cuba. The Justice Department has just unsealed an indictment charging former Cuban President Raúl Castro with murder for his alleged role in the 1996 shootdown of two planes that were carrying humanitarian aid that resulted in the deaths of 4 people, including 3 Americans. Now 94 years old, Raúl Castro, of course, is the brother of the late longtime President Fidel Castro, who ruled Cuba for nearly 50 years. The 4 volunteers who were killed were part of the humanitarian group Brothers to the Rescue. Now, the charges come after President Trump took action, of course, in Venezuela, then Iran. He's now focusing on Cuba as well. President Trump previously imposing a blockade of oil shipments to Cuba in an effort to continue to cripple Cuba's economy. President Trump has said in recent months that the U.S. was in talks with Havana. He raised the possibility of a friendly takeover of Cuba, in his words. And the president has said Cuba is going to fall pretty soon, in his words as well. You saw those images just moments ago, the motorcade bringing the Attorney General Todd Blanche to this news conference. Also traveling with the Attorney General is our own Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who joins me on the phone. Pierre, this will be a major announcement here today.
Indeed, it was 30 years in the making. This case has been developing. The Justice Department now saying they have evidence. They can charge Raúl Castro with direct involvement in the shootdown of those 2 sets of planes in which 4 people were killed, 3 Americans. The Attorney General will be speaking shortly. We expect to get a question or two to him. Motorcade just landed. It took us about 15 minutes to get here, David.
We have been watching images of the motorcade come in, bringing Todd Blanche to this news conference in Miami, again, where they will announce these charges against Raúl Castro. Pierre, the obvious question for Americans watching this unfold, why now?
That is the exact question I expect to pose to the Attorney General. They claim that they have evidence. If you read the indictment, I had a chance to peruse it. They claim they have evidence that any kill order regarding those boats that were in planes that were dealing with trying to get out of Cuba. This rescue group was involved in trying to help people who were trying to traverse the Florida Straits to get to the United States. In this particular case, the order was given to shoot those planes out of the sky, killing those people. The government says it has evidence that Raúl Castro was directly involved in that chain of command.
We're going to keep our eyes peeled on this news conference. Pierre, I know you're traveling with the Attorney General. You'll be entering that room right along with the AG just moments from now. We will go right to him when he announces this indictment that's been unsealed. Also watching with us, Matt Rivers. He's live in Miami at this hour, South Florida, Little Havana. News spreading very quickly there, Matt, I'm sure. Have people learned of this indictment?
Yes, they absolutely have, David, and they've been waiting for this really even since we reported it last week. They knew this was coming, and now that they can see the indictment for themselves, we've been seeing people drive past us here in Little Havana, honking their horns, Cuban flags out the windows. We've seen some Make America Great Again hats here. People are very much in favor of this, at least in this part of the world. I think a lot of the people that we've had conversations with now, David, are saying a couple of things. One, this is a big deal for them, but also what it means to have the United States government call this man formally a criminal. It means a lot to people here in Little Havana.
Todd Blanche, the Attorney General, entering the room along with other U.S. attorneys, the FBI director, deputy director expected to be there, Senator Ashley Moody of Florida. Expected also to be here today. We'll be hearing from her as well. You see Todd Blanche there just off to your right, now standing behind the podium. Expected to make some comments here. Let's listen.
Good afternoon. I'm Madeline Pumariega, president of Miami-Dade College. Welcome to the Freedom Tower. Today we gather at the Freedom Tower for a solemn and meaningful occasion as we welcome representatives from the United States Department of Justice, community leaders, families, honored guests to commemorate the legacy of the Brothers to the Rescue and honor the victims whose lives were tragically lost in this pursuit of freedom. This ceremony is deeply significant because we stand here at the Freedom Tower, our Freedom Tower, a place that represents refuge, resilience, and enduring hope for those who came to America seeking liberty after fleeing a tyranny and oppression in Cuba. So many of our parents, our uncles and aunts, walked through these doors, 400,000 of them, looking for hope and opportunity. Today is their day. For generations of Cuban exiles, this building became more than a processing center. It became a symbol that freedom was still possible, a symbol that democracy, human dignity, and human rights matter. Today, we remember the 4 brave men of the Brothers to the Rescue, whose lives were taken on February 24th, 1996. Not in war, but during a humanitarian mission rooted in compassion and in courage. Their sacrifice became a painful reminder to the world of the brutality of the Cuban regime and the high price so many have paid for speaking freely, defending democracy, and standing for human rights. We also recognize the countless victims who have suffered under the Cuban regime across generations, prisoners, families separated by exile, those silenced for dissidence, and all who have endured persecution, all in the pursuit of freedom and dignity. Their stories, our stories, are part of the larger story of Cuba, but also the part of the story of Miami and this Freedom Tower itself. As we gather today, may we honor the memory of those not only with reflection, but with renewed commitment to truth, to justice, and to the preservation of the democratic values for future generations. Thank you for being here today for this important commemoration. May God bless each of you, and may God bless the United States of America. And to our brothers and sisters in Cuba, we hear you. Freedom will come. Cuba will be libre. It is now my distinct honor, representing all of you, to introduce the United States Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here in the great state of Florida. Today, we are announcing an indictment charging Raúl Castro and several others with conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals. Mr. Castro and the others are charged with additional crimes as well, including destruction of aircraft and 4 individual counts of murder. The indictment was returned by a grand jury sitting in this district in Miami on April 23rd, 2026, and was unsealed today. For nearly 30 years, the families of 4 murdered Americans have waited for justice. On February, this is a story all too familiar. On February 24th, 1996, 2 civilian aircraft operated by Brothers to the Rescue were shot down over international waters by military aircraft from Cuba. 4 men were killed: Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandro Jr., Mario de la Peña, and Pablo Morales. They were unarmed civilians and were flying humanitarian missions for the rescue and protection of people fleeing oppression across the Florida Straits. As alleged in the indictment, Raúl Castro and 5 co-defendants participated in a conspiracy that ended with Cuban military aircraft firing missiles at those civilian planes and killing 4 Americans. Those are the allegations returned by a federal grand jury. My message today is clear. The United States and President Trump does not and will not forget its citizens. I want to say that we also do not forget the families, the loved ones, and the friends who have carried grief and heartache for 30 years. For the first time in nearly 70 years, senior leadership of the Cuban regime has been charged in this country, in the United States of America, for acts of violence resulting in the deaths of American citizens. Nations and their leaders cannot be permitted to target Americans, kill them, and not face accountability. President Trump is committed to restoring a very simple but important principle. If you kill Americans, we will pursue you, no matter who you are, no matter what title you hold, and in this case, no matter how much time has passed. I want to thank, and everybody in this room should thank, the FBI, the prosecutors, and the agents who worked on this matter. It includes the intelligence community and our federal and state law enforcement partners. They did the work here, so thank you. There's a reason why myself and the senator and other leadership are here and not in Washington, D.C. to announce this indictment. The community here, you all, understands the history of the Cuban regime better than anyone in America. Many families here know the cost of oppression. I've heard stories over the past week and past months, every one of them heartbreaking. They know that the pain caused by the regime did not stop at the island's shores. And today's indictment, while it does not bring back the murdered victims, it makes a statement. The United States government has not forgotten these innocent men who were shot out of the sky. And as in every criminal case, the defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty by a jury of their peers. But today, the Department of Justice has taken an important step and brought this indictment. I'm proud to stand here on this podium with U.S. Attorney Jason Redding Quinones to my right, Chris Rea, Deputy Director of the FBI. You're gonna get to clap. You're gonna get to clap for Jason in 20 seconds. Chris Rea, Deputy Director of the FBI, and James Utheimer, the Attorney General of this great state. And your great U.S. Senator is here as well. She's very busy in D.C., but wouldn't miss this for the world. So thank you for being here, Senator Moody. So I want to thank Jason for his leadership down here in Florida. He's doing a great job beyond today, and I'd also ask him to replace me at the podium to say a few words. So thank you, Jason, very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. It may sound a little repetitive, some of the things we're saying, but they're worthy of saying twice, 3 times, 100 times. So bear with us. For nearly 70 years, the communist Cuban regime has acted with impunity in its systematic repression of its people. And for the last 30 years, this regime's senior leadership has gone unchallenged for its murder of 4 Americans. Today, the United States announces a historic indictment charging Raúl Castro and 5 co-defendants for their roles in the February 24th, 1996 shootdown of 2 brothers to the rescue. A Miami grand jury has charged these defendants with conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals, destruction of aircraft, and 4 counts of murder. The victims were 4 unarmed civilian pilots engaged in humanitarian work: Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandre Jr., Mario de la Peña, and Pablo Morales. They were not combatants, they were not armed, and they posed no threat. According to the indictment, Raúl Castro, then Minister of the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces, authorized and oversaw a military chain of command that ended with Cuban fighter jets firing air-to-air missiles at civilian aircraft over international waters. Those missiles destroyed the planes without warning and killed all aboard. For 30 years, the families have waited. The Miami community has waited, and our country has waited. Today is a step towards accountability. This is the first time in almost 70 years that a senior leadership of the Cuban regime has been charged in the United States for acts of violence resulting in the death of Americans. The passage of time does not erase murder. It does not diminish the value of those lives, and it does not weaken our commitment to the rule of law. Standing here in the Freedom Tower gives this moment added meaning. This is the Ellis Island for Cuban refugees. It was the main processing center for countless exiles who fled communist Cuba with the hopes of reaching the American dream. My own mother spent her first night in the United States in this very building. After fleeing brutal communist Cuba, like so many families in Miami, mine understands what it means to arrive here with little more than hope and a chance to rebuild under the protection of American law. That history reminds me of the duty we carry, a duty to seek justice for victims, a duty to stand with families who have carried this pain for decades, and a duty to make it clear that those who kill Americans cannot simply wait out American justice. Today's date, May 20th, also carries deep meaning for the Cuban people. It is their 4th of July. It marks Cuba's independence from colonial Spain. It reminds us that the pursuit of freedom, dignity, and accountability spans generations and still lives alive and well in the heart of the Cuban community. Today's indictment is one part of that long effort. When I came into office in August of last year, I made reviving this case a priority. And I want to thank the team that made it happen. My first assistant, U.S. Attorney Yara Lorenzo Calucas. And my assistant United States Attorneys, Abby Waxman and Mike Guilfarb. In conjunction with FBI Miami's Cuba Squad, which we're not going to name or show their faces, for their commitment and drive to seeing this case through. It's incredible work. I also want to thank Mr. Attorney General for his incredible support and steady leadership of the department. And before I conclude, I also want to acknowledge the assistance of Florida Attorney General's Office. Attorney General James Upmeyer and his team have been strong partners in this effort. Their support reflects the best of federal and state law enforcement working together in service of justice. With that, I turn the podium over to FBI's Deputy Director, Chris Rea. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I specifically want to thank the Attorney General and, of course, the U.S. Attorney here for allowing me to speak to you all today. And I also want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to showcase the small part that the FBI played. As was stated, today marks a significant moment in a long, long journey for justice. A journey that began 30 years ago with an unprovoked attack on American lives. 4 humanitarians were on a noble mission to help those fleeing oppression. Instead, their lives were violently taken in a reckless act by the Cuban regime. The FBI, the Department of Justice, and countless others never forgot them, and we never stopped hunting for the truth. Today's announcement shows that if it's 5 months, 5 years, 5 decades, we will keep pursuing you, and we'll keep pursuing anyone who intends to harm our citizens, and they will face American justice. I'd like to thank our dedicated special agents, our dedicated prosecutors, our dedicated intelligence analysts, and our dedicated professional staff, as well as our counterintelligence program, for never giving up. Enormous credit is due to the many teams across the 16 different FBI cases regarding this matter. The teams who have worked to hold members of the Cuban government's WASP network accountable. Our people have systematically and relentlessly searched for evidence, conducted countless interviews, and pieced together critical intelligence for nearly 3 decades. They turned dead ends into fresh leads. And over the years, that hard work has paid off with convictions of multiple operatives for activities related to that vicious shoot-down. The charges we announced today are only the latest milestone on that road to justice, a road paved with persistence, partnership, and extreme, extreme resolve. To anyone who spies on our country or harms our citizens, know this: the FBI, the Department of Justice, has a long memory. We will come after you, and we will find you. As I close, I'd like to close with a personal anecdote, as this is deeply personal to me. You see, I was a former member of the United States Coast Guard right here in Miami Beach and Key West, Florida in the 1990s. I conducted numerous humanitarian missions with my fellow Coast Guardsmen, rescuing Cuban citizens who were just trying to find a better life. I also was fortunate enough to act as security during remembrance ceremonies held at the 12 nautical mile limit just outside of Cuban territorial waters. I served on Coast Guard cutters that provided the security to the friends and family who were just trying to remember their lost loved ones. So for me, today brings everything full circle. So in that vein, we dedicate all 3 decades of casework to the memories of the loved ones lost that day. To the victims' families and friends, we stand with you as we hold those responsibilities to account. Now, I'm going to turn it over to the U.S. Senator of this great state, Senator
There you have
Moody.
Ray,
Thank you.
FBI Deputy Director, turning it over to the senator there from Florida. And the Attorney General, Todd Blanchard, will be back at that podium in just a moment, expected to take questions. And among those asking the questions, we believe right off the top will be Pierre Thomas, our Chief Justice correspondent. And of course, that key question of why now, Pierre is set to pose to the Attorney General. So we're going to monitor this, and we'll go right back to that moment as soon as we get there. In the meantime, let's bring in Dan Abrams, our Chief Legal Analyst. And Dan, you heard the Deputy FBI Director say 3 decades of investigating this case, culminating with this indictment today. From a legal perspective, what's the rationale, the reasoning for bringing these charges now?
Well, look, we're going to have to receive the indictment and hear more to know exactly why they say now. My guess as to why they say now would be that they would say they have been more vigilant in trying to bring this case than past administrations. And as a result, they would say they've gathered new evidence. But here's something very important to remember. This is actually going to be adding something to an existing criminal case that was brought in 2003 in connection with this attack. So it's not as if there have been no charges brought in connection with the attack since 1996. There were charges brought in 2003 against 3 people, but they were never extradited to face trial. And that's going to be the challenge here, right? So once they get this indictment, which they now have, they have the charges. It doesn't seem they have statute of limitations problems because these particular federal charges don't have statute of limitations. Challenge 1 is going to be getting these people, including Raúl Castro, back to the United States. And number 2, even if they do, remember, this is now a 30-year-old case, right? That means witnesses are going to be testifying about things that happened 30 years ago. That's not easy in any case. Now, prosecutors will say that they have an audio intercept of Raúl Castro where they may have his voice. That would be a very important piece of evidence. Of course, there'll be a fight over whether that becomes admissible, but probably would be. So a lot of things to think about after the point of we've got an indictment, we now have a grand jury. Then you start thinking about the next steps, which is getting them here and what a trial might look like.
94 years old, Raúl Castro, and I know it is a bit of a guessing game at this point, Dan Abrams, but what does that look like when you talk about extraditing a 94-year-old to the United States for a case 30 years later here?
Look, Cuba doesn't extradite, right? So there's going to have to be some new policy that is implemented based on political force to get Cuba to suddenly give up Raúl Castro. I don't see how that would happen, but look, things are changing, and there's a lot of pressure going on right now. So that would be the only way. There's not going to be, I don't think, the sort of typical extradition process that we would have with, for example, a European ally, et cetera. So that's going to be the first thing they're going to have to think about. And you point out, David, correctly, his age, right? He's 94 years old. How long would this process take? Has there been any working behind the scenes to think about what would happen next and how they would go about getting these folks? Now, remember, in Venezuela, the United States took another attack on that and went in and captured him. And the justification was that he was wanted on federal charges, and they were old federal charges. So could there be a situation like that happens again here? That's another possibility.
Of course, you're bringing up Nicolas Maduro. That looked very different from what we're seeing play out here. But as you point out, Dan, this will certainly be fascinating to watch as it does play out. Obviously, because of the relationship between U.S. and Cuba, or lack thereof, there isn't an extradition process in place. And even with our allies, extradition can oftentimes be a real challenge, let alone when you're dealing with ongoing tension for many, many decades with Cuba. So we'll continue to watch the legal process. Still very early in all of this, since we have just learned of the indictment. Dan Abrams watching along with us here today. Dan, thank you. Also watching this play out, and again, we're awaiting the Attorney General, who will take questions from reporters in that room, including our Pierre Thomas. As we await that moment, I want to bring in Teresa Rodriguez. She's a longtime former reporter for Univision, very well known in South Florida, across the country, but in South Florida particularly because she covered Cuba for many years, continues to cover this story. This is a major headline, a major development for many who wanted to see charges for 3 decades now.
It certainly is, David. Thank you for having me here. As has been said already, 30 years in the making. So this is quite unprecedented, and especially for a government, a regime like Cuba's. No, and the question is that Dan brought up: what happens next? No, will the regime, will Raúl Castro be defiant? Is there already a plan in place that we don't know about? These are all questions we got to think about. We got to think about the Maduro playbook. Circumstances are definitely different here. But for some of these people that I see in that audience today, some of them are relatives, one of which I spoke to yesterday, and you can see the smiles on their faces. They lost their loved ones. They lost their sons. So this is quite a day, a historic day for the Cuban exile community, not just here, but all over the world.
Teresa, we have heard in recent months from President Trump a number of messages on Cuba. Among the messages we have heard that there could be a friendly takeover, in his words. He said there have been back-channel talks, if you will, with Cuba. But he's also indicated if it's not a friendly takeover, that regardless, it is time for leadership change there. I know it's a hypothetical for you, but it is hard to predict what this is going to look like, what Cuba will look like in the months ahead, weeks ahead, perhaps.
Oh, it certainly is. But I will tell you this. The Cuban government, the Cuban regime is very aware of how politics work in the United States and timing of everything. So they know that if any action is going to take place, it's going to take place soon, sometime before the midterm elections. And I will also say that they do respect President Trump, because after what happened with Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela, they respect him a lot more, and they take him seriously. And also things that are happening and falling into place, as if, you know, the domino, they're all falling into place. Today is the 20th. It is the day of the revolution. It's observed by the people outside of Cuba. It's a day that Cuba was freed from Spain, but obviously not observed in the island. Also the fact that Secretary Marco Rubio sent a very direct message today via X to the people in Cuba. And this is the first time he's done it in Spanish, where he's clarifying, we are not responsible. The embargo is not responsible for this dire situation you are facing right now. Your government is responsible for this. And then he also made an appeal, and he said, this administration, this president, wants to give you the opportunity to be able to speak freely without any fear of repercussions. This administration wants to give you the opportunity to know what it's like to have ownership, own your own property, your own businesses, and become as prosperous as those Cubans who are living just 90 miles from your border. So it was a very direct message. He also talked about the aid that they want to, the humanitarian aid, the $100 million they'd like to provide Cuba. So it was a very direct message. Did they hear this? I hope they did. But a lot of things are happening, and I think there's a bigger plan in motion here.
Teresa Rodriguez, veteran journalist who has covered Cuba for many, many years. Our thanks to you. Right now, Florida's Attorney General speaking. After him, Todd Blanche will be back up at the microphone to take questions. And Teresa makes an excellent point that the Cuban people, but certainly the Cuban regime, the leadership of Cuba, very aware of politics in the U.S., and how this works here, that with an announcement of an indictment and with the upcoming midterm elections this year, of course, just a few months away, that the dominoes could fall here and fall rather quickly. I want to bring in Whit Johnson, who was just in Cuba, interviewed the foreign minister for us. We aired the interview on World News Tonight. Whit, not only did you talk to the foreign minister, but you talked to people in the Cuban community who live there, the Cuban people, to get their thoughts on the situation, the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba. But I want to start with the foreign minister. When you sat down across from him, was there a realization that change was coming through the legal process in this indictment, and certainly the political pressure that's mounting, given what the Trump administration is signaling here?
Yes, David, I absolutely got the sense that Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez was feeling that additional pressure from the United States. And in fact, at the moment that we sat down, there was another round of sanctions that the United States imposed on Cuba. And we've sort of seen this week after week. And this is just, one more example of how the Trump administration is turning up that pressure. And if they're not going to get the Cuban government to go along and change on its own, they're trying to force that change. And there were some interesting takeaways in my conversation with the foreign minister. One, he said that talks between the U.S. and Cuba were showing no signs of progress whatsoever. He also said that they take the threats from President Trump seriously, but that there would be a bloodbath if the U.S. tried to take military action, something similar to what we saw in Venezuela. And I pressed the foreign minister if they were willing to negotiate on anything, if anything was on the table as it comes to demands from the United States, government economic reforms, the release of political prisoners, which he denied that Cuba even has. And we know that's not true based on numerous reports from human rights groups. But he essentially said that Cuba was unwilling to talk about anything relating to its internal affairs and unwilling to take any responsibility for the current state of the suffering of the Cuban people. And David, I can tell you, I've been getting messages from people today. The situation is growing much more desperate. There's a lot of anticipation about what will come next, what the United States might do. I interviewed somebody who was sifting through the trash, looking for food, also looking for phone cables that perhaps they could sell on the black market. I heard from a family who said that the blackouts there are getting worse. They were 16 hours a day when I was there a couple weeks ago. Now they're 22 hours a day, and many more people are forced to cook their food by burning coal. They can't get fresh food. There are no markets open. They're using non-perishable food items. So people are forced to try to buy a carton of eggs when their monthly salary doesn't even cover that. So nothing is working, and it absolutely feels like it's on the brink of collapse, and people are desperate to know what comes next. David?
Really fascinating with your reporting here. ABC News has been committed to covering the Cuban people for a very long time. It was a decade ago we took World News Tonight, the broadcast, to Cuba, anchoring in an historic broadcast from there. And I remember at the time when I was traveling through Havana and other places talking with the Cuban people, they were actually telling me at the time that many of them, and look at this is a culture frozen in time. The cars are beautiful, and it's something that you would see here in America, at a vintage car show, an antique car show, but they're there without parts. This is because everything is frozen in time there. Todd Blanche now taking questions. Let's go and listen.
Although the questions should be directed to the reason why we're here today and not something else. So are there other reporters? Pierre.
Attorney General Blanche, key question, why now? Was there a breakthrough in this case? Can you speak to the evidence that leads you to believe that Raúl Castro directly participated in the deaths of those Americans who were killed? And I have a follow-up.
Well, I cannot explain or justify why now as opposed to 2 decades ago or 30 years ago when it happened. But what I can say is that you just heard a lot of people talk about a ton of work that the FBI did, state and local intelligence communities, our U.S. Attorney and the Attorney General's, the State Attorney General's team. And that evidence was presented to a grand jury in late April, and an indictment was returned. So I can't, as far as what the evidence is, well, a lot of it's in the indictment, and it would not be appropriate or fair to comment outside of the indictment about the evidence. But as you guys know, a grand jury is presented with evidence and then returns an indictment to the extent that they believe there's probable cause that a crime has been committed, which a grand jury certainly did here.
And quick follow-up, what are the prospects that you could get Raúl Castro to the United States to face justice, given the situation there, and what steps are the U.S. willing to take to get him back here?
Well, we indict men outside of this country all the time, and there's all kinds of different ways that we get them here. The reason why we indict somebody is because we want them here to face justice in front of a jury of their peers. So how we go about doing that obviously depends on the circumstances in the case, and I'm not going to go beyond that, but we expect that we didn't indict. This isn't a show indictment. This is an indictment because we expect that there was a warrant issued for his arrest. So we expect that he will show up here by his own will or by another way and go to prison. Next question.
Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche taking questions. Pierre Thomas making news with his question there. How do you intend to get the 94-year-old Raúl Castro brought back to the United States? You heard Todd Blanche say this is not a show indictment. This is the real thing. There is a warrant for his arrest, and he indicated that he would be brought back, but could not say exactly how he would be brought back here. But the intention is to have him tried by a jury of his peers, with this indictment stemming 3 decades after the shootdown of those 2 planes carrying humanitarian aid that, of course, resulted in the deaths of 4 people, 3 of whom were Americans. Again, the major news today, an indictment unsealed. The Justice Department has just unsealed this indictment, charging the former Cuban President Raúl Castro with murder for his alleged role in that 1996 shootdown of those 2 planes carrying 4 people, humanitarian aid, and again, 3 of the 4 were Americans. As I mentioned just moments ago, we have taken the broadcast to Cuba many times over the course of the last decade and more. At the time when I went 10 years ago, the Cuban people, 11 million or so, were making about $20 a month. Just about 5% had internet access to what the world was talking about, and even that was restricted. You saw, more than a decade later, with Johnson, return to darkness. Now 22 hours a day in the dark with these energy blackouts and the blockade. And now this indictment of Raúl Castro. It would appear that both legally and politically, things are changing in Cuba. Our coverage of this breaking development will continue. ABC News Live, abcnews.com, and of course, I'll be back with the entire team for World News Tonight a little later today. I'm David Muir in New York. Until then, good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
David, thank you. I'm Kira Phillips. Our breaking news continues here on ABC News Live. We never stopped hunting for the truth. That's what FBI Deputy Director Christopher Reyes said of the actions of the Cuban regime. They were reckless, he says, and now 16 FBI teams never stopped working on this case for the past 30 years. And now Raúl Castro has been indicted, facing multiple charges, including 4 counts of murder. Let's get back to Attorney General Todd Blanche as he continues his press conference.
Anna had a mental breakdown. Last time I checked, you didn't.
Doesn't involve the acting attorney general. So what I can tell you is that this is this indictment, as we've said a bunch of times today, is a result of a lot of hard work and what we believe is an important step in bringing some semblance of justice to the families and friends and loved ones of these men who were murdered. But beyond that, I'm not going to talk about what could happen with Cuba beyond that. Yes, go ahead.
Attorney General Gloria Ordaz from Telemundo 51. Thank you for this opportunity. The next step is going to be an arrest warrant, and I ask you this because the Cuban exile would love to see Raúl Castro in the same position of Nicolás Maduro. And a lot of legal experts that we have interviewed during these days have said that Raúl Castro, that this indictment will be more symbolic than practice, and that Raúl Castro should probably die in Cuba. What is your message for them?
Well, I'm not going to compare cases, for one. For two, like I said a few minutes ago, we indict men who are not physically within the United States all the time. This is not a new endeavor or adventure for us. And so the way that we get people here who are charged with a crime varies. There's all kinds of different ways. And this is not, there's an arrest warrant issued for a reason, because we certainly expect and believe that Mr. Castro is entitled to his day in court right here in Miami. Sue, yep.
Thank you, sir. Jesse Kirsch with NBC News. You mentioned that the grand jury approved these charges weeks ago. Curious to know what, if any, role the CIA director's visit to Cuba in recent days played in deciding to move forward with announcing this indictment. And
I'm not going to get into why we decided to unseal the indictment today, except to note the place that we're standing and the important day that today represents. But yes, you're right. There's a lot of factors that go into when a sealed indictment is unsealed, if ever. And so beyond just the fact that, look, by the way, it wasn't that long ago. It was late April. It's mid-May. So.
Thank you. One other question. If people look at this and say this is at least partially just a pretext to push for regime change in Cuba, what would you say to people who take that perspective?
I don't care what people look at and think. I mean, we returned an indictment, and that's what we're here to talk about. If people want to speculate or think what they will, I don't care. Okay, one more question. Blue.
Hi, so the final speaker, thank you. Hi, I'm Deborah Acosta with the Wall Street Journal. The final speaker mentioned or hinted at a potential team of people that has been put together to lead the country. Who are those people? Are they in the United States? Are they in Cuba? Is it a mix of both? Can you share a little bit more about that team?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Can you say it again?
At the final speaker mentioned that there is a team of people that's going to lead this forward. That's your nickname. Huh? Final speaker.
So why don't we let the final speaker address that?
And thank you for the new nickname.
Yeah, very good.
Will ever be known as the final speaker.
That's probably easier to pronounce than my last name, Uthmeyer, but I don't think I referenced what you're saying. Where I talked about people spread across the state, I was talking about the spies and the criminal conspiracy that the evidence has revealed took place. There were spies working from Miami all the way down to the Florida Keys, gathering intelligence and providing it to the regime to figure out where these aircraft were going to be and put them in harm's way. As far as other geopolitical things, I'm going to stay in my lane for now. Thanks.
Here live out in Miami, Florida, but we do have a slew of folks lined up to talk about just this historic day of Raúl Castro facing charges now, 4 counts of murder among a number of other charges. Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas is there in Miami. He was traveling with the Attorney General as they were stepping up to the mic. Pierre, you were right there in front. You got the first question to the AG and asked him point blank, why bring these charges about today? Clearly, he pointed out the historic moment of what today represents, but clearly there are many other factors that went in to today's announcement.
Indeed. They said this was a case 30 years in the making, that they have been working on this case for many years. But also it's clear to me that part of it is the dynamic that we're facing, in which the administration is tightening up the pressure on Cuba. And as we know, there's something called prosecutorial discretion, and they can choose to bring cases when they will. Now, according to the indictment that was unsealed, they believe that they have intelligence and information that shows that Raúl Castro was at the top of the food chain and had made decisions regarding what to do about boats and or planes flying into Cuban airspace or near Cuban airspace. And the government's contention is that he made the decision that this particular kind of humanitarian organization and these kind of planes could be shot out of the sky. And that's exactly what took place. As you recall, Kira, 2 MiG fighter jets shot 2 Cessnas, unarmed Cessnas, out of the sky at the direction of the Cuban government. That much was known. Those 2 pilots and their commanding officer were charged or indicted in 2003. They've never come to the U.S. to face justice. The question is, and I asked that question as well to the Attorney General, what is the prospect that we can get Castro here to face justice? And he was vague about that, other than to say they didn't just file this case for symbolic reasons.
Well, Pierre, I think what stood out was the one line that Todd Blanche said, that when he was asked point blank, and you asked him as well, could we see Raúl Castro here in a courtroom in the United States? What's the next move? And he said, well, he's going to show up here, by his own will or another way. Did you catch that? And what do you make of that? He didn't discount the fact that they may forcibly extradite him.
Well, it seems to be that everything is on the table. And again, we have the backdrop of Venezuela. We don't know if forcible interdiction will be involved here. We don't know the answer to that, but clearly they're at least trying to posture and give the sense that everything is potentially on the table. So that remains to be seen. But again, the thing that struck me the most is that this was a community event that we just watched. There were hundreds of people in Freedom Tower, which again is the Florida's version of Ellis Island, according to many of the people who spoke today. And I was struck by it's one of the few press conferences, if not the only, in which there have been hundreds of community people there cheering on a prosecution. Never seen anything quite like it.
I don't think any of us have. It's a historic day on many fronts. Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas, appreciate you. Our Matt Rivers also there in Miami, in the heart of where Cubans gather. Matt Rivers, some of the things that stood out to me, the passage of time does not diminish murder. Innocent men were shot out of the sky. Finally, the man responsible will face the counts for murder. If you kill Americans, we'll come after you no matter how much time has passed. And a lot of time passing for those behind you, the Cuban Americans, those that have came to this country because of the brutal Castro regime. What are folks telling you today?
Well, the memories are long, Kira, no question. It might have been 30 years ago, but to the people of this community here, it might as well have been yesterday. And I think that what we've heard from the people that have come out here in Little Havana today is it's about damn time, essentially, is what we've heard from a number of different people we've spoken to. They've wondered why this didn't happen in previous administrations. And so, frankly, they're grateful to the Trump administration for taking this step and getting the ball across the goal line here. But it's not just about this one specific crime. Yes, they're looking for justice for this specific crime, but I think what this is more of for people here is less about the specific crime and more of the symbolism of the United States government formally calling Raúl Castro a criminal. And I don't think that we can overstate that. They call him a murderer. And that means something to the people here that want to see change on that island, that want to see the government change beyond just this one individual crime. It's saying that the family that has ruled that island for the better part of 70 years now, the head of that family is a criminal.
And Matt, you were there just in Cuba not long ago, along with our Whit Johnson. Whit, you had a chance to sit down with the foreign minister. When you did do that, did you get the sense that he had a feeling or any idea that this day may be coming?
Yes, Kira, I think that the foreign minister and the entire Cuban government was very aware that the United States, the Trump administration in particular, is turning up the pressure. And the day that I sat down with the foreign minister, that same day, another round of sanctions came down. And I think it's very important to look at all of this through the lens of Venezuela, because if you look back at the timeline, there was an indictment against Maduro, and then there was a superseding indictment with updated charges right around the time that the United States went in with that daring military action and extracted him, took him out of the country. And by the way, a lot of people forget this, dozens of Cubans were killed in that attack because many Cubans were sent there to Venezuela to help protect President Maduro. So there are a lot of parallels here, and I asked the foreign minister specifically if he took the threats from President Trump seriously. He said they do take it seriously, but he warned that Cuba is not Venezuela and warned of a bloodbath if the United States were to try to take military action and go in with something like that. And that context matters because we've mentioned that Raúl Castro is 94 years old. He's going to turn 95 in just about 2 weeks here. And you also have President Diaz-Canel, who is a Communist Party loyalist, who is the heir apparent to Raúl Castro. Even if you were able to extradite Raúl Castro, then what happens to the president of Cuba? Part of that government still remains intact. And the military apparatus, the Gaesa, which is basically an economic engine of the island, so much of the island's economy runs through the military itself and their business enterprises. It's not that easy to just go in with like a decapitation event of leadership and pull out the top leaders and then change everything. So there are major questions about what comes next. But it's clear that the U.S. and Cuba remain very divided on a number of issues, and it's the Cuban people who are suffering the most. Kira, I've been getting text messages from some people who I've been in contact with there. They say the blackouts are getting worse People are having to cook their meals with coal because there is no way to cook. There's no way to store food, so you can't have any fresh food in the house. We've been talking about the gas prices there in Cuba. Well, now they're completely out of oil. So many of the gas stations are closed. People are forced to go to the black market, and even that gas and diesel is drying up. So people can't get to work. So bit by bit, what was left of a fragile economy on the brink continues to shut down even more. And so many people there are looking to the U.S. Kira, there are different opinions about what they want to see next, but they're desperate for some kind of change.
Desperate for change since the revolution in 1959 when, the corrupt Batista was what the U.S. wanted to see gone, and that change was supposed to be good for the people. And since then, they've been experiencing everything that you've just been talking about, not allowed freedom or free speech, their economy failing and getting worse every day. I want to bring in a Cuban-American journalist and also one of our contributors, Teresa Rodriguez. I mean, Teresa, just historically looking at what Cuba has been dealing with for decades, and then reaching this point where Raúl Castro is being indicted. I mean, is it fair to say it's not just about someone being charged for murder on an incident that never should have happened? The brothers to the rescue, right. Just trying to, create this mission to save Cuban rafters, to help these families in their fight for freedom and for justice. But we're talking about the Castro family that for decades has made the lives of Cubans just simply miserable.
Right. And you're talking about, as you said, a monarchy, right? So there's so much more. I agree with everything that's been said thus far, but I would just like to add that Raúl Castro is considered the grand leader of the party, of the revolution right now. So a lot of eyes are going to be focused on what is the next step. Will he be defiant? Will he try to fight these charges and say that's not true? There's plenty of proof out there. The recordings are out there on that day. There's also an interview that was done by Fidel Castro many, many years ago where he said, I gave the order to Raúl, and Raúl, being the head of the armed forces, is the one who issues that order. So everything is out there. But then the other question is, by the way, we do know the protests, as Whit explained, the protests are just growing and growing. For the first time, you see the Cubans coming out, and they're confronting the police. They're confronting the police because they've had it. And may I add, I'm very sure that some of these police officers and some other people who are in other ranks of the military are probably feeling the same way. It's never been this bad. This is the bottom of it's never been. This is a dire situation. Now, this is something that I spoke to one of my experts about, and he said, how about if a deal has already been worked out? How about if they've already offered Raúl, in exchange for everything, safe passage for him and his family to a third country, and he can take his money with him? Would he take it? And I had different answers from different people. One said he's 94, he's going to be 95, as has already been explained. He'd probably take it. But then I said, but he's still really the head of the armed forces. He's in charge. And the Castro regime is the one who really has the money. Wouldn't that be embarrassing for him to abandon the armed forces? And wouldn't that also cause some kind of fracture within the leadership of the regime? Because other people who've been doing his dirty work might say, well, what happens to me? And someone said, but he could say he's doing this to avoid a bloodbath. And that way, he's remembered as a martyr. Good point. However, in the history of the regime has never put the people of Cuba first. They have put the regime first.
Yeah, and it's something that we've been talking about and covering clearly for decades. Teresa, thank you. Stay with me. I want to bring in former federal prosecutor, former GOP Congressman John Katko, also defense attorney Brian Buckmeyer. Guys, I want to just get your reaction from a legal perspective. We're now hearing from the Cuban president. Here's part of the statement saying, calling what happened today, this indictment of Raúl Castro, a political maneuver devoid of any legal foundation aimed solely at padding the fabricated dossier they used to justify the folly of a military aggression against Cuba. I'd love to get both of you to react to this. John, go ahead and start.
Well, what else are they going to say, right? I mean, the thing I thought was so interesting is what Pierre asked at the press conference, and that was, why now? Why not before? And, you know, as a former prosecutor myself on the federal level, sometimes you bring cases when for various reasons, sometimes they linger for various reasons, but there's some reports that maybe have some declassified information that has made the case stronger now. But for whatever reason, a grand jury has returned an indictment against this individual. And so the Cuban regime can say what they want. The charge is now there. And there's no question that this is part of a bigger chess match here. It started with Venezuela. Then they choked off Cuba's oil supply. Cuba has never been a regime that's been able to stand on its own. It relied on the Soviet Union. And then when the Soviet Union collapsed, they had to rely on Venezuela. Now Venezuela's done with them. So they are really on the brink of economic ruin anyways. They've never been able to survive on their own. And this may be enough to kick them over. And as you've heard from others, you hear all these protests going on. So it seems to be the boiling point is getting there. And this may be enough to knock it over. The big question is, what does a Trump presidency have in mind to enforce or try and bring these individuals to justice? Because right now, there's no way to get them out because the Cuban people are not going to give him up. The Cuban government's not going to give him up. So that is the question now. I don't think this is just a hollow indictment that's symbolic. I think there's much more work here, and we don't know all the plans yet, but I foresee a lot of things coming in future.
Yeah, something much bigger, as we heard Teresa Rodriguez say. Brian, I want to bring you in on this because I was looking through your notes. You actually looked through this indictment line by line, and you are actually interested in the part about unindicted co-conspirators, which tells you someone flipped here, right? And I notice you're curious to see how many unindicted co-conspirators there were, aka snitches.
Yes, Kira, and that's my question here. And I'd also pose this. It might be the reason why we're getting the indictment now. We already heard in this presser that the indictment was actually returned in April 23rd of this year, and now they're presenting it today. Of course, the optics of May 20th, a very important day for Cuba and their independence. But there are two unindicted co-conspirators. Those are people on the inside who know information. We know that unindicted co-conspirator 1 is the former director of intelligence, and that unindicted co-conspirator 2 is the head of one of the bases that is accused to be where the fighter jets flew out from to take down the planes. Now, this indictment reads as a conspiracy towards killing U.S. nationals, with the director of intelligence being at the heart of gathering information that the Brothers to the Rescue were going to fly planes at a certain time at the end of February in 1996, and that according to the indictment, Cuba actually said to their own people, hey, spies, don't fly on these planes because we might be targeting them at this point in time. And then, of course, as the other co-conspirator, you have the head of the base saying that they directed some of these practice runs to do this all. If those two co-conspirators can give the information necessary to a conviction, it could be a real case, or as the Cuban government is suggesting, not much is there.
So much more to learn. Brian, thank you. And thanks to everyone that has weighed in thus far. We will continue our breaking news coverage as Raúl Castro has now been officially indicted. We've got all the details for you and a much larger conversation. We'll be right back.
If this were a Hollywood movie, what would be your perfect story?
We'd be lying if it wasn't Premier League or something like that. Why not dream big?
Wrexham is just one step away from the top league of world football.
Make no mistake, it is cutthroat.
Just reminding you to breathe.
We're in with it, big boys now.
I'm in love. Come on!
FX's Welcome to Wrexham, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscription.